What's up, YouTube? Capital G here. Like that title? Of course you guys do. I told you that I had something special planned for the next episode of The Return Of, and I really hope that I don't disappoint. Now, you guys may notice that I've disabled the like and dislike option for this video. Why did I do that? Well, because you guys know as well as I do that common sense isn't always common on the internet, especially on YouTube. And for every 5 of you guys who understands the argument that I'm trying to make and that gets the premise of this video, there will be 100 people who simply would want to dislike the video, say, Capital G, you're a moron, Dark Strike Fighter's not coming back, despite the fact that the Return of series is not prediction based, and would simply say, I'm going to unsub and I hate you. I do not wish to see my rating bar turn into a Sith lightsaber, if you can picture that. That's why I disabled it for this video and this video only. Now, moving on. I really did think long and hard before I made this video. In fact, this video was actually planned to go up before the Witch of the Black Forest video, because I've been thinking about this video for over a week, and I really spent a long time thinking of any positives, you know, if this card would affect the meta in the same exact way that it did when it was banned, any any real valid justification for the action of unbanning this card. And I couldn't really come to a lot of pros, but I did ultimately find one, and that one is all I need to make my argument. Now, for me to take such a contrarian mindset, or a contrarian stand, for me to make such an uphill battle with this debate, I of course had to take notes from my personal debating idol, that would be Skip Bayless. The reason that Dark Strike Fighter must be unbanned is because this is probably, if not the biggest injustice that has ever happened since the concept and since the creation of the advanced format. This is the only time in the history of Konami where they basically just caved to the pressure of the players. You know, they heard all the moaning and groaning on the forums and on the tournament level, and ultimately Konami just gave up. They threw their hands in the air and they said, okay, you know what? You want it, you got it. We're just going to flat out ban the card, and it just wasn't right. It seemed like even before the list came out, it was almost a foregone conclusion that Dark Strike Fighter was getting the axe, and it's just something that isn't right. It's something that I wasn't okay with then, but it's even worse now because of how hypocritical they have been. The reason that I say that Konami's actions were hypocritical is because despite the fact that these similar situations have come up throughout the game's history constantly, this is the first time where they basically let the players put them into a corner and dictate their actions. Konami just let the players force their hand. And if you guys think back to Invasion of Chaos, everybody likes to surround the set by nothing but chaos talk and think about how, you know, chaos basically dictated the format. That actually wasn't true. In fact, Invasion of Chaos gave birth to the first consistent FTK. I'm talking about Magical Scientist FTK. When Dark Magician of Chaos was first released, the card was not restricted at all. It was unrestricted. And at the same exact time, Magical Scientist was unrestricted. The reason that that's important was because people ran reasoning into the deck, because basically the only cards you really ran in the deck were Magical Scientist, Gillosaurus, Catapult Turtle, and Dark Magician of Chaos. The levels were so distorted and all over the place that it was very difficult to hone into what your opponent still had left, what probability, and so on and so forth. So it basically made DMOC fit right into the deck, and it was the first time in history that players weren't actually they weren't given a chance to actually do anything. They were basically sitting there twiddling their thumbs while their opponent sat across the table and just won the game without the player having any control over any of the actions that were being done in the game. And there was a huge amount of backlash around this deck. There was, you know, players were enraged. They were disgusted by this. This deck was essentially killing the competitiveness of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because both players weren't actually getting a chance to interact in the game. And what did Konami do about that? Konami acted in typical Konami fashion. They didn't ban either one of the cards. In fact, they just limited them. Another reason that I believe that Dark Strike Fighter needs to be unbanned is because I'm not fine with cards going from 3 to 0. It's basically saying that we give up, we cannot fix this. You're not even trying to rectify the problem. Every criminal, no matter how heinous the act or how violent the crime, all has the same right. They have the right to a fair, just, and speedy trial. And you're basically throwing out the baby with the bathwater when you ban a card that was at 3. You're not even giving yourself a chance to try and mitigate, you know, all the problems that the card caused. And I can give you 2 prime examples. Substitute and Fishboard Blaster and Fog Monarchs, where you saw a deck that was tier 1 2 years ago. Those cards go away, and they haven't done anything relevant since, and you're absolutely seeing it right now in Plant Synchro, where Konami basically jumped the gun. They banned Spore and Glow Up Bulb, and you're seeing it. The deck is not going to recover. It's going to basically disappear for the next 3 years. That's basically what it boils down to. When it comes to theme cards, it basically cripples the deck, because flat out, for lack of a better term, it kills the deck. It's essentially giving the deck the death penalty, and the more I sit back and think about it, it's too harsh of a penalty because these decks never recover. And while Darkstrike Fighter isn't themed, the premise remains the same, that 3-0 isn't healthy for the game. A card going from unrestricted straight to banned without there being any middle ground, it's essentially saying, we give up, we can't fix you, so we'll just condemn you. It's kind of like saying, we've tried absolutely nothing and we're all out of ideas. Now, a lot of people are probably watching this video and screaming at their desktop or screaming at their monitor, Cyberstein, what about Cyberstein, capital G? And that situation is a little different, and I'll refresh everybody's memory who may not have been playing at that time. Basically, Cyberstein OTK had top 8'd a couple of Shonen Jumps, and basically finally broke through in a final against Chainburn. And when it won, basically Upper Deck just threw their hands up and said, you know what, enough of this. So they got together, they decided to emergency ban the card. They sent out basically an email patting themselves on the back and saying, look what we can do. And they basically eradicated the problem. They banned Cyberstein, and that caused a rift between Konami and Upper Deck, because Konami wasn't really on board with Upper Deck making decisions like that without their consent. But that's a whole different topic for a whole different video. I look at Darkstrike Fighter in this format, and I think that you wouldn't be as problematic in this format, but you would definitely be just as powerful, because I believe that we can both agree on the fact that it would be very easy in a deck like Chaos Dragons, which would be obviously the prime offender with Darkstrike Fighter, to summon a Red Eyes, have your Red Eyes summon a Light Pulsar Dragon, attack with both of those monsters, and then in main phase 2, basically nonchalantly summon your Effect Veiler, tune up for Darkstrike Fighter, and then launch your board for game. And it still comes down to the problem that I do have with Darkstrike Fighter and cards that are designed like this. Cards that you can't really play skillfully and only have one real purpose. What I mean is, these are also cards that they force the game state, because by book or by crook, you're either going to win or lose the game the turn that you activate them. Cards like Last Turn, Cyberstein, and Darkstrike Fighter. The turn they hit the field, the game has been decided. You are either going to lose or you are going to win because of these cards. Now, as some of you watch this video, you might be thinking, capital G, this is stupid. You're trying to make your entire argument based on a technicality. That's irrelevant, because if you look in your heart, you know at the end of the day that wrong is wrong and right is still right. And need I remind you that Chaos Emperor Dragon spent 2 formats limited to 1, as if we needed a second format to tell us this card is obviously doing damage to the game, while Darkstrike Fighter, on the other hand, was banned after 2 months, and I can't but help look back and think, man, this card clearly got jobbed. Now, you need only look back 1 year to find a situation identical to Darkstrike Fighter. Of course, I am talking about Tech Genesis Hyper Librarian, where you basically had one card and one card alone systematically destroy what I think a lot of people would come to the general consensus was a pretty decent meta. And I couldn't help but sit back and think, this is Darkstrike all over. Players are clamoring for this card's head. There is an uproar of outrage, and they want this card banned, not limited, not semi-limited, and they don't want to hear anything else of the sort. And in typical Konami fashion, Konami decided to ignore the players, and when the ban list came out, it proved once again Konami looks after number 1, that being themselves. They basically said, you know what, no, we're going to do what we're going to do best. Ignore you guys and do what is in our best interest. So when I look at Darkstrike Fighter, I can't help but ultimately think, you got the raw end of the deal. I've always said that the worst decisions you will make in life are when you are emotional, and I think that's what happened with this card. If you look at some of the most powerful cards in the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! History, you take cards like Yata Garusu, Chaos Emperor Dragon, Painful Choice, Delinquent Duo. I can't help but think how format after format after format after format, These cards were allowed to be limited, in some cases semi-limited. Hell, in Delinquent Duo's case, limited, banned, limited, then banned again. And I think Dark Strike Fighter got banned after 2 months. That just isn't fair. This video is ultimately about not if the card is broken or not. It's what's fair in Yu-Gi-Oh! And if you're going to believe that this was an injustice, which I think I've ultimately proven. I think the only valid solution for this problem, simply put, is a one format parole for Dark Strike Fighter. I'm not saying that the card should be unbanned forever. I'm just saying, just like in the prison system, you're allowed parole, you do something bad, you go back in forever. What I'm saying is, DSF should basically have a one format parole. We evaluate how the card interacts with the rest of the meta, and then we go from there. But as it stands, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth thinking that, you know, some of the most powerful cards were left alone for who knows how long, while Dark Strike Fighter was banned after 2 months. It's basically the equivalent of getting 10 years in prison for stealing, you know, a video game at your local Walmart. Thank you guys for watching as always. I really hope that you understood the premise of this video, because once again, I'm not trolling. What happened to Dark Strike Fighter was kind of fucked up when you put it into perspective of the totality of the entire ban list.